out. He throws his hand out with the force and he stops the ship and he's pulling it back, and he gets on the ground and he's so mad and he's just ripping off the sides of the wall. Hey guys, welcome to another video. So I think I might have skipped putting a video up last week, or it was late. I have been trying so hard to keep up with posting a video every Monday consistently. So I'm just going to get right into the video this week and just get straight to the point. I've reviewed the first 3 episodes of Kenobi already on this channel, and as usual I always try to link all my videos here on this channel back to writing or reading somehow, usually through writing tips and stuff. And I'm different from other authors here on YouTube because I like take the tips and stuff that I know and learn, and some of that is because I watch a lot of movies and TV shows. A lot of writers read, and that's where they get their stuff. And I'm really different because I get mine from watching movies and watching TV shows and stuff. And so that's why I wanted to start incorporating some of my tutorials in with the shows and movies that I watch. Obviously the big issue on YouTube is copyright. My channel's not monetized yet, but that still doesn't stop them from striking my videos. And I've had issues where one of them was basically banned and I wasn't allowed to post it until I addressed the issue and all that stuff. So long story short, let's get that mumbo jumbo out of the way and get right into the video. But I'm still going to try to incorporate that aspect into my channel. And today I'm going to be reviewing the last 2 episodes of Kenobi, especially the finale. And as usual, we're going to link it back to writing and have some juicy stuff to talk about. So let's get right into this. So, the last 2 episodes of Kenobi, in my opinion, were the best ones. Episodes 5 and episode 6 were the 2 best, I feel like. Episode 5 was essentially, if you don't want spoilers for Kenobi, go watch the last 2 episodes and then come here and watch this video, just to let you know. So episode 5 was essentially where Obi-Wan met back at the USC in episode 4, so we met with the people from the past, and they were kind of held up in one area. The Empire sieges that, and so there's a lot of action, a lot of fighting. And they're kind of trapped in this one area. They're trying to get the ship up and running, so Leia's in this little cubby area trying to get the wiring back up because her little droid, was overridden and turned bad by the Empire and all that stuff. So Reva shows up, and Obi-Wan talks to her, and her history is finally revealed. I think it was meant to be this really great epic twist and everything, but I'm pretty sure I know I saw it coming, and I'm fairly certain that about 80 to 90%, a lot of people already saw this coming because it was a theory that was running around on the internet. But essentially, Reva was a Jedi in the Jedi Temple as a youngling. So the opening scene actually is her and with the other younglings. So she was a Jedi in the Temple who became an Inquisitor, and she's actually had joined them to kill Vader. So we kind of all saw this coming. It wasn't really that epic of a twist. To me, it was just necessary to understand her character. It wasn't necessarily a surprise. That's not necessarily a bad thing because it actually worked, and it, helps her character be more likable and more sympathetic toward her. But it wasn't that surprising to me. Which again, not everything has to be a surprise, but I'm just pointing that out. That are just weird in some of these episodes that don't make a whole lot of sense. And as a writer, I see them, and then sometimes as a Star Wars fan, I see a few other issues with certain things, which I'll get to. No show is going to be perfect. And overall, I kind of like the show, which I'll get to in a minute as well. But anyways, so one of the things that was weird is that the 2 clones brought Obi-Wan out to face Reva, and then they talked, and then they brought him back in the back, which kind of didn't make sense. If you're going to take a prisoner, leave him out there with the hundreds of other soldiers. They kind of did that because obviously the writing needed him to do that. And as writers, you have to make sure that your stuff makes sense and that it's not just you doing it because you want to do it. But that's neither here nor there. Vader shows up, he chases Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan runs away, they get in a ship, and they basically leave. So Obi-Wan leaves Reva to kind of deal with Vader alone, which felt really odd that Obi-Wan used her like that to basically fight Vader alone and abandoned her. But Vader, I mean, gets this really cool. I stuttered so much, that's embarrassing. Anyway, so Vader gets this cool moment where he comes out, he throws his hand out with the Force, and he stops the ship, and he's pulling it back, and he gets on the ground, and he's so mad, and he's just ripping off the sides of the wall, and then the ship's empty, and it was actually one behind there they sneak up and fly away on. Some fans have problems with this. I thought it was epic. I didn't mind. And in my mind, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is some things that other fans are having problems with that I actually feel like are explained or make sense. So one of those things being, some fans were angry that Vader pulled down an empty ship and was tricked, and then the other ship was the real one. And in my mind, and me and my family have talked about this, is that he was so angry and so focused on his anger and getting Kenobi and winning that he's not really paying attention or thinking clearly in the moment. So he just reached out and drew the ship back kind of instinctively and didn't really take the time to like sense for life or anything like that. Other people say that he'd used up too much Force ability to stop the second ship, and that's why it escaped. In my mind, I thought he was just reaching out for the first ship that he had, and then the reason why he didn't get the second ship was because it flew off too fast and he couldn't stop it in time. Take that as you will. A lot of people did get like, well, why didn't he stop the second ship with the Force? But, you know, it is what it is. So that's my take on it. I think it flew off too fast for him to grab it. Pretty simple. Accept that or don't accept that if you want. So then, obviously, they're escaping. So this... First of all, from a writer's standpoint, the scenes jumping to Obi-Wan, talking to the, I'm going to call them the rebels, but the rebel people, and saying goodbye to Leia, it was really heartfelt with Leia, but I did feel like those scenes dragged on a bit too much, and it could have dragged because I was just looking forward to Obi-Wan and Vader, but it did drag a little bit, but that's neither here nor there. So Vader decides to send the whole starship after Obi-Wan, which didn't make sense to me because, one, you could send TIE fighters after the small ship and then go after Obi-Wan, or Vader could get in a smaller ship, go after Obi-Wan while the big ship keeps going after the rebels. It didn't kind of make a whole lot of sense for everybody to go after Obi-Wan and just to leave the rebels escaping. But again, it's one of those things that the show has a lot of little things like that that's like, that doesn't make sense. But I mean, it's a show, not every book is perfect. And really quick writer's tip here, as a writer, when you're going through your book in the editing phase, I guess as a writer and an editor's tip, when you're going through the book during the editing phase, that's one thing that you want to clear up, is little discrepancies like that don't make a whole lot of sense. If the bad guy is chasing the good guys and one person's meant to draw them off, you have to make sure, like in this case, why doesn't the whole big ship just go after them and let Vader take his own small ship after Obi-Wan? Why not send smaller ships after the good guys and then everybody else go after Obi-Wan? You know, you have to make sense of that stuff. So anyways, Obi-Wan and Vader land and they start their fight. This was the rematch of the century as it was marketed by Disney. And in the meantime, Reva got stabbed by Vader in the last episode. I forgot to mention, after everybody escaped, Reva attacks to try to kill Vader on her own because Obi-Wan abandoned her. And that fight scene was epic. Vader was a total beast. He was literally playing and toying with her. So it was nice to see that, to see how menacing he was, and to see that where he's like moving and dancing, like fighting as a graceful kind of way instead of like big and lumbering. Like I actually found the choreography of that fight with Reva really good, and it was one of the best lightsaber fights in the whole show. But he's using the Force to stop her lightsaber, and then he never even actually uses his own lightsaber against her. He tears hers in half and fights with her that way. And it's like, you're not even worth me igniting my own lightsaber about. It was epic. He stabs her. I was so happy. I like the character. Oh, let me rephrase this. she makes a good villain, and that I feel like she's well written and well portrayed, well played by the actress, as well as well written by the writers and directors and stuff like that. I just hate the character, which she's written to be hated, so it's a positive thing. I don't hate the character in the sense that, oh, I don't want her to exist, or that sort of thing. So I was kind of happy when she died, but not in a menacing way. It's literally like she's a villain and I don't like her because she's a villain, that sort of thing. The same way you would hate, like, some bad guy who's doing something terrible to people, like how you hate the bad guy in The Patriot for what he does. It's that kind of hatred. It's what you're supposed to be feeling as an audience. So just to clarify that, get that out of the way. So anyway, so she's stabbed. Which, the irritating thing about this is she's been stabbed, Inquisitor's been stabbed, in The Mandalorian, that other bounty hunter girl, she was stabbed. Everybody's been stabbed in the stomach and lived from it, yet Qui-Gon Jinn, back from episode 1, is the only guy to actually get stabbed in the stomach and die from it. So that's just one rant that I hate, that they're not, that it's kind of Disney-fied in a way, and nobody's dying anymore, because you have to have character deaths to make some stakes, especially in a show like this where most of the characters actually have to survive, because episode 4, Luke and Leia survive, Owen and Beru survive, Vader and Obi-Wan survive, the Grand Inquisitor survives. Who else do you have left to get killed? The one rebel chick was the only death in the whole show, and we kind of saw that coming. So Reva being a sacrificial kind of death makes sense. And I'm not saying you have to kill everybody all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But when there's no stakes, you have to make stakes elsewhere. And I feel like they didn't take that opportunity with some of the things that they did, because everybody's just getting stabbed in the stomach and surviving from it. So she survived stab wound to the stomach with the lightsaber, ignoring physics, because she would be like, it would burn through her nerves, it would burn through whatever organs or veins it hits. It could have potentially hit her spine, but she's up around. She's walking, she goes to Tatooine, she's going after Luke, and I really liked Owen and Beru during this part because they were fighting to protect their homestead, so it actually enhanced the Owen and Beru characters, so that when you watch episode 4 and their whole farm is burned, you're like, oh, that actually hurts because you know them better, and you feel like, oh, they would have put up such a fight to protect their home and Luke and all that stuff, so that was good. I also appreciated that they kept it canon, because Luke is not supposed to see a lightsaber until episode 4, when he shoves it in his face, because he's looking at it and he points it at himself, so he's clearly never seen what it is before, so they kept that canon. I felt that the fight was really good. I loved the choreography, and it was really intense. A lot of people have commented about the camera shaking, and how in the prequels, like with the last duel that they had, it was steady and the camera never shook. It shook when it was meant to, because so you could feel the explosions or whatever, but this one kind of shakes unnecessarily, and it makes it hard to see. And then a lot of people are complaining too that a lot of Hollywood movies lately seem like they like doing fights in the dark, and it's just so dark you can't hardly see anything. And I think especially in Star Wars lately, they've been doing it for the effect of the lightsabers and how much they glow, but it's still kind of dark. I liked it, and I loved how Obi-Wan and Vader used the Force a lot in this fight, whereas in the other one it was all basically fighting stuff, which was fine, but it's really cool that they're using more of their Force powers and their Force abilities now that they've both kind of matured, and they're middle-aged now and whatnot, so that was really cool. So I remember talking about this beforehand, and I was expecting a huge grand fight, and half of me wanted it to be as epic as the one from episode 3, but I knew in the back of my mind that it would nothing is ever going to top that duel for me, because that is the best duel I've ever seen, and I would argue one of the best fight scenes in all of film history, and with, it ties with a lot of other fights for me, but that's one of the best. So this one was good, it was amazing, it was really intense, and then at the end, they actually copied from Star Wars Rebels, so, which is one thing that some people didn't like about it, is, oh, they just did a Star Wars Rebels thing, so they didn't give us anything new. And for me, I actually love that, because I watched the situation with Star Wars Rebels, which, if you don't know, Anakin had an apprentice between episodes 2 and 3 during the Clone Wars. Her name was Ahsoka, and the way that resulted was she had left the Jedi Order, and then later on in the middle of, I think before episode 4, she is part of the rebellion, and she and Vader encounter each other, and they duel, and she's running toward him. I'll put the clip here so you can see it, but she's running toward him. She hits his mask, and it's the exact same scenario. So I'll put these clips here so we can watch them and compare that one to this one from Obi-Wan. So if you don't want spoilers, click away. So it was so emotional for me, like, because I'd seen Rebels, and for me that one made me cry. I was bawling like a baby when we saw Anakin again. But for me, it was still the Clone Wars Anakin, which Matt Lanter, the voice of him, does a great job. But I grew up with Hayden Christensen, and Hayden will always be my Anakin, the Anakin I know. I grew up with Hayden and Ewan, like some older fans grew up with Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford. So this was like this was my dream. Like, I remember talking about this in one of my videos, where we needed the resolution between the dialogue between Obi-Wan and Anakin. I talked about this in my last video, comparing the fight with how in the original one they didn't have that emotional conversation because it hadn't existed. Their past did not exist yet. But now that it does, this was like a continuation, a closure, or an epilogue for fans like me who wanted that closure between Anakin and Obi-Wan. So when Obi-Wan hits his mask and he turned down, I was like, I knew it. I know what they're going to do, because he did the same thing in Rebels. I mean, if you just look at the two scenes side by side, like, look at this. It's so emotional. But the fact is that we had it in Rebels, and I remember at the time that this came out with Rebels, I was like, man, wouldn't that be cool to see this in real life, but with Hayden? And at the time I was like, Hayden will never play Darth Vader. Hayden's over. They're never going to bring him back. It was not even an option for me. It was just this weird dream that I want, like, oh my gosh, that would be so cool kind of thing. But I never thought it would happen. So for me, getting to see this was so emotional. Hayden's performance and Ewan's performance, oh my gosh, like, it tore me apart. like, if you watch this, there's no way you can watch this and not feel something. When Obi-Wan's looking at Vader and Obi sees, you can see it in his face the moment that he realizes and he sees Anakin. And then, of course, Anakin's voice and the closure that he gives Obi-Wan. And I feel like that was actually kind of still half Anakin at that point, where he's giving Obi-Wan closure and getting the closure that Obi-Wan needs and everything, that you didn't fail me. I destroyed, Anakin. And it's just so, and then Ewan's like, I'm sorry for all of it. And he's crying, and it's like, oh my gosh, it tore me up. Like, I can't watch that without just, oh my gosh, it's so emotional, and it's what I needed. Like, some fans are like, well, the show doesn't justify its own existence, and it's like, for me, it does. That moment right there justifies the entire existence of the show. I needed this growing up with them, being left on episode 3, feeling like unsatisfied with the confrontation in episode 4. And I don't care if it's not as epic in terms of scale as episode 3 in terms of the fighting itself. That emotional confrontation right there, was so worth it. So you may be asking, what does this have to do with writing? Well, I may have a video either planned already that I haven't edited yet, so it's filmed but I haven't edited it yet, or I may have already posted it here on the channel about writing emotional scenes. I think I did death scenes, and I think I did romantic. I don't know if I've done emotional scenes yet, but I guess I'll give kind of a quick little tidbit. I'll give some quick advice about that. So obviously the one thing that I've mentioned before in these types of videos is that with books, you don't have the visuals. In this, it's the visuals that sells it. You see Ewan crying, you hear his voice trembling, you can even hear the pain and the regret in Anakin's voice, and then it mixes with Darth Vader's, and it's just so beautiful, and it's just like the metaphors and everything. So with books, it's you have to do more than just, you have to do more to sell it, because when you look at somebody on the screen, you can see them crying, it's automatically going to get a response out of you if it's really good. So the type of stuff that you would do to make things emotional in your books, obviously would be to build up to it. We had the anticipation of a confrontation for this whole one because it was marketed that way, but without marketing in the story, Obi-Wan and Vader first encounter each other in episode 3, and then they leave, and so you're expecting some more, and then it kind of teases a little bit in episode 5 where he was, chasing Obi-Wan and barely missed him and everything else, and so you have to build up to these emotional moments. The second tip I would say is that you need to have the stakes high, not necessarily the physical stakes, like in a book where the fate of the galaxy is at stake, or the characters' lives are at stake, that sort of thing. You need the emotional stakes for both characters. In this case, Vader's trying to basically get revenge on Obi-Wan for what he did to him in Vader's mind, like he burned him and all that stuff. And Obi-Wan's trying to get closure, trying to save the galaxy, trying to overcome this trauma and what he did, and he feels guilty and responsible for what happened to Anakin and everything. So there's the emotional stakes involved with it, and so you have to build up to the emotional sad punch, essentially. I call it like the punch, the moment that punches your readers in the face. That's what you want, or more importantly, in the heart. So you need to build up to that, which means the emotions have to be built in both characters, and in order to have a really truly emotional point, the emotions have to be building up within them to the point where it's like a volcano that finally explodes. I think I have used a video example of this before, but so Vader is wanting Obi-Wan. He's wanting him. He tried in episode 3, and Obi-Wan was just this weak coward that wasn't putting up a fight, and he got away. And then in episode 4, they got away stupidly, but they got away. And then in episode 5, he got away, and he snuck around, like he barely just missed him. So this is the moment that Vader wants his revenge. Obi-Wan's finally fighting back. He's back up to par with the skills that he needs to have, and Vader's just, I need to beat him. And you can feel the tension have building inside Vader, that the stakes, the emotions, and the anger and rage are as high as they will be with him, especially when Obi-Wan gets the upper hand and starts beating him. It makes makes it worse, and Vader's just getting angrier and angrier. And then for Obi-Wan, it's been building up because he had trauma, he was giving up, he's starting to see hope again because of Leia and how she's helped him, and he's emotional, and he's been so afraid of Vader up until this point that it's time. He tells, I think he's talking to Qui-Gon, in his mind, like he doesn't see Qui-Gon, but he's talking to him, that it's either me or him. He's going in this thinking that one of them's not going to be walking away from it, and this is the time where he has to face his fear, he has to face his past, he has to face the guilt, he has to face his failure, and it's built, and that you can feel the fact that this emotion is built up in both of them, so that way when this happens, not only do you have all that emotion and tension between them, but you have the past. I mean, think about what they've been through. This Vader was burned to death, pretty much, almost to death, and left for dead by the man that he considered his brother, whereas with Obi-Wan, the man that he considered his brother destroyed and killed everybody, younglings, everybody, and he was forced to fight him and leave him for dead, kill him in his mind, to destroy the Sith as much as he could, and, you know, do what was right. And they've both been through this trauma together, and so they both came to this point where they have to face it. There's no running or escaping from it. And up until now, Obi-Wan's only seen Vader behind the mask. Like, how could you become this? What have you become? And in episode 3, I think, and Vader's like, I am what you made me. But when the mask is cut, Obi-Wan sees Anakin. And that's what's so important about that moment in Rebels, too, because Ahsoka sees Anakin. They see Anakin. It's not just Vader. They see the man that they loved and held as a brother and a mentor and a friend. They see him again, and then you hear his voice, and it's reminded of the man that you held close to your heart. And so you have these emotional stakes and this emotional build up to the thing, the catalyst, if you will, that sets the stage for the emotions to come pouring out. And when the moment that Obi-Wan sees the mask broken, the moment that Ahsoka sees the mask broken, the moment that they hear his voice, is the catalyst that sets the emotional volcano to eruption. And that's kind of the moments that you want to build in your own book with your own stakes, is the emotions building up within these characters or the character, and something causes it to break, and then it just erupts. And so when you're writing, again, you don't have visuals, so you have to describe it more than just saying that they were an emotional mess or, you know, something like that. You can't tell it, you have to show it. So it's a mixture of telling and describing the emotions themselves. The pain was overwhelming her, and, you know, but you also have to, or him, whatever character you want to do, but you also have to mix that. I feel like it's a mixture between showing and telling. It's not both. It is both. It's not one or the other, because you have to show you can't just show the emotions the whole time. Sometimes you need to actually mention the anger and the pain or the sadness or whatever emotion you're trying to describe. But then you also have where you need to describe physically what it's doing to them, because you don't have the visuals like we do here. You would describe the tears falling down somebody's face. You would describe, you know, that the pain overwhelmed her, so she collapsed to her knees, or she collapsed to her knees. The pain overwhelmed her, so she sobbed uncontrollably. The words were unintelligible as she spoke, muttering to herself, crying over and over again about whatever. You know, I'm just making this up as I go, but you get the idea. So you have to just describe, show the emotion by the physical reaction your character is making. But then at a point, you don't want to do paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs describing this body language, because that'll get overwhelming. At some point, you have to describe their thoughts, talk about how they're feeling, talk the thoughts out, go in deep third person narrative. Go in deep third person narrative where you're talking, where instead of doing their thoughts in italics and saying he or she thought or I thought, it's where you do something like, where it's just within the narrative. So the first one here that you look at is more an example. Obviously this sucks. Don't take this to be anything, you know, important, because I don't think it's very well written at all. I can write better than this, I promise. But the tears fell down Obi-Wan's face, burning his eyes the moment he saw through the mask. Anakin, it's truly him. Obi-Wan thought as shock and pain rippled through him. That's how a lot of people would write it, is you'd have the thoughts in italics followed by a comma and kind of a tag like you would with dialogue, you know, the character thought or he or she thought. And again, mixing the real physical movements with the actual, like, emotions mentioned, shock and pain rippled through him or something like that. A better way to actually show those thoughts, is to actually write it out in what I call a deep third person narrative. So the tears fell down Obi-Wan's face, burning his eyes the moment he saw through the mask. Anakin. It was Anakin. It truly was him. Shock and pain rippled through him, and he stumbled backward. All along, his Padawan was still there, hidden beneath the surface of the monster he'd become. So the first part, Anakin, it was Anakin, it was truly him, is the same thought, but just not italics and no tag. And then describing the physical stuff, the emotional stuff that he's going through. Shock and pain rippled through him, but then we add in the physical reaction to that. Because of the shock and pain, he stumbles backwards, which again, you don't see that in the show, but when you're writing it in a book, you need a very obvious physical reaction to sell it to the readers. You know, he stumbled backward. You could use the word staggered to make it more dramatic, but either way. So you mentioned the thoughts, not italics, no tag. Shock and pain, so the emotion followed by a physical reaction in whatever order you want. And then all along, his Padawan was still there, hidden beneath the surface of the monster he'd become. That's where you're getting into the core deep depth, like the core depth thoughts. That's not right. You're getting into the depths of the character's thoughts, the core of what they're thinking, and you're including that in your narrative. So you're not the writer, you're not the narrator. Your character is from a third person perspective. All along, his Padawan was still there, hidden beneath the surface of the monster he'd become. That's a really deep thought, and you couldn't really translate that really well if you did something with italics. You know, I mean, you could, but it would just come off as a little weird to me. So yeah, again, you want to mix a physical reaction describing the physical actions the character is doing as a result of the emotional pain, but you also want to describe their emotional pain as well, whatever they're going through emotionally, and then mix those together to make a perfect blend of what your character's going through. And then when you include their thoughts in it, then that sells the emotional impact. And whatever it is, it's not just the way that you write it, that's part of it. So you have to write it well, choose good words, follow, you know, a good blend of showing, telling, describing what the character is going through so your readers can feel it too. And then you also need the stakes itself to be high in the moment between this character or with what's happening to your character. Otherwise, it's going to fall flat and not be a big deal, because if, you know, you have some random character going through some random thing, then your readers aren't going to care how emotionally it's written. It just doesn't matter. So you have to really sell the circumstances, the situation, I guess, and the plot line, and, like, you know, get your readers attached and concerned for this person and the stakes, and it'll be impacting to the readers, especially with the more that your readers care about your characters, the more impacting it'll be. Another reason why this is so important, like, what if this was between Reva and one of the Inquisitors? We wouldn't care as much because we don't know them very well. We've had, 6 episodes with them. We don't give a crap about them. We care because it's Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. We've had 3 movies with them and all the Clone Wars shows, plus any books and stuff that you've read along with that. We've been with these characters. We grew up with them. We love them. When you can make your readers fall in love with your characters, then the emotional turmoil that they're going through will have a bigger impact. And that's what you want, is for your volcanic eruption of emotion to have a big impact. You don't want it to be a tiny eruption. You want it to be, and for your readers to go like this and practically throw your book across the room because they're so shocked about whatever you just did. So long story short, this is my review of the Kenobi final 2 episodes, since I did the first ones already, and my kind of how to write an emotional impacting scene. I hope that my tips have helped you. And overall, I would give the finale of Kenobi a rating of like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. It was really well done. It was really well written. It was really it was like really emotional. The overall show, I would give either a 7 or an 8 out of 10, because it did have kind of some weird things that struck me as weird as a writer, and then there were some things that struck me as not really fitting canon or breaking canon as a Star Wars fan, which for me is a big deal. It has to make sense in the story. When you're writing a big series, I know, I've written a 17-book series. It all has to make sense. And when you do things within that series, it still has to make sense. Like in the Republic Chronicles, when I'm writing in a planet, one of the old Valiant planets that I mention, I have to make sure, okay, is this what is happened to this planet? Does this make sense? It's 1,000 years later. I still have to make sure it makes sense with the Valiant series, because when you're writing before and after something, when you're writing a series, you have to make sure it all ties in together and makes sense. That's like a basic how to be a writer 101, tip right there. And sometimes it feels like Lucasfilm and Disney right now does not always have that in their minds and doesn't always know that, or the writers that they hire don't always know that. But overall, it's a good show. I like it better than the Book of Boba Fett. I really like it for the most part. I do have a few issues here and there, but it was really done, well written. The finale was really well written, I may add. It was well performed, I should say. So yeah, and I hope that these tips about how to write an emotional scene has really helped you. And if you liked these tips or my review or me just babbling and being a Star Wars fangirl, please give this video a big like because it helps me. And please share this around and subscribe for more writing videos every Monday.